All right guys, welcome back to Hollywood Mechanic. Today we're talking about flat rate pay for mechanics and how no one wins. All right, so what is flat rate pay? Flat rate means that I'm going to pay you a predetermined amount for a job. Let's say a water pump, for instance, takes 12 hours to get to and to change. If I've determined that, then I'm going to tell you as a tech, I'm paying you 12 hours to change this water pump. Now, if you do it in less time, you get paid 12 hours despite taking less time. And this sounds like great. You know, if you're a good technician that is working at the same dealership on the same types of cars, you can crank out water pumps and make a good commission, basically. But let's look at it a little bit deeper. Not all technicians are paid in flat rate. This seems to be an American thing. In Europe, they're paid salary with performance bonuses. So if you are consistently doing something that makes you look better than your other employees, then you'll get a performance bonus. US, all technicians are paid on a flat rate. Why should you care? Let's say that while that technician's in there and he's doing your water pump, he sees that there is a leaking seal on the timing chain tensioner. This actually happened on one of the cars that I work on. One of my clients has a 2012 Ferrari FF, and it had the 7-year maintenance plan, so Ferrari covered all the maintenance items. So it was only serviced at Ferrari before coming to me. He had all the service paperwork to show that. He had some oil dripping out of the front of the engine. And when I looked up in the engine area, I couldn't quite see where it was coming from, but I did see a cracked idler pulley for the belt. That was a little weird, so I went ahead and quoted the job for a cracked idler pulley and to do a further teardown to see where the leak was coming from. And I discovered this area that was just slathered in black silicone. Now, when you cover a gasket area with black silicone, you're just putting a temporary band-aid on it, and it's actually making the problem worse. That leaking oil is still going to leak under that silicone, but then it will be trapped there on an area that's not designed to have hot oil, and it will cause a hot spot on that cover or block area or sensor, which will cause uneven expansion and contraction of those metals, which cause further problems. Tore it down further and found that yes, the idler pulley was cracked. I replaced it, and the timing chain tensioner was leaking. So I removed it and replaced that gasket. Leak's gone, the belt is safe and not torn, but all this was done by a tech at Ferrari who, when he was going in to change the belt, damaged the pulley and saw a leak. The thing is, he was getting paid flat rate to change that belt. Now, to add on that timing chain tensioner gasket, maybe only added him another hour of flat rate pay, but they didn't have the gasket in stock. They didn't have the idler pulley in stock. So you can't start the car without this belt on. You have to tear down the intake tubes to get to this belt. So if he had said, hey, there's a problem here we need to fix, he would have had to have put the car back on the ground, put it into neutral manually, had another employee help him push it out of his bay somewhere to store until this little tiny cheap part came in, and he would have made no more money. He would have probably lost money. So what flat rate encouraged him to do was band-aid it, patch it up, send it out. In a year, it'll come back with a leak, and I'll charge them again and get a big flat rate to start the work all over again. So the customer definitely loses here. Guess what? Technicians most of the time lose, especially when you're dealing with high-end cars like Ferrari, Lamborghini, or God forbid, Bugatti. You never ever see these cars coming in for really big jobs. They come to the dealer most of the time for normal maintenance items, and maintenance items are so fast that you can't really make a big amount of money on it. You spend more time getting the car on the lift than you get paid to do the oil change, so you don't really make that much money. So for high-end technicians, it's really frustrating. Imagine that you're doing a very complex, hard job. While you're in there, this takes a massive amount of time. There's a ton of areas to slow you down. So you're just rushing through, and it ends up causing future problems for the customer. Comeback car, you're not getting paid a flat rate on, so then the tech ends up losing money, and the dealership doesn't look as good in the end because you have cars that are not being taken care of as well. So overall, flat rate is a terrible thing. But on the other hand, you have salaried pay, and the dealership just doesn't trust technicians. They don't trust us to do transmission services. They don't trust us to do our own diagnosis. We have to submit a case for complex issues, And so they don't trust us to work hard being paid. And we see that actually at some dealers. I know in LA, they changed the pay rate to $30 an hour minimum for technicians, which really is needed. LA cost of living is very high, and in America, you have to buy your own tools. It's very quick that money disappears and you're living off of very little money. But because of this pay increase that went from, I think it was like 22 an hour to 30 an hour, a lot of the techs now are taking a ton of smoke breaks. Do a little bit of work, go outside and smoke, because if they don't hit that flat rate quota, then guess what? The dealer still has an obligation to pay them at least $30 an hour, which is probably what they were making a couple of years ago, hustling through flat rate jobs. It's frustrating. What we need to do is pay techs enough that they are excited and happy about their job and not by the hour. In the short term, the dealer might see some productivity go down, they might see some loss of revenue, but in the long run, you'll see happier customers, better jobs going out, which means more people coming back to you to do work, and a real commitment to perfection, which is why you're supposed to be going to the dealer. Fortunately, now the dealer has kind of a reputation of being a ripoff financially as well as doing subpar work. So why would you continue going? It's a short-term failure that will lead to, eventually people leaving the dealer.